And you're live, but I don't know what the screen is. Where's it going?
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Connect In on a Thursday night. Thursdays just seem to be rolling around way too quickly at the moment. We have a very special guest tonight, and it is a privilege to have Major Brendan Noddle from Melbourne 614 with us. Welcome to you, sir. So good to have you on tonight.
When you talked me up then, Andrew, I was getting very excited about who the special guest was, but clearly that person wasn't available and you stuck with me. So thanks for having us on.
No, it is an absolute thrill to have you on tonight. And when I phoned you a bit earlier in the week, I was just really hoping and praying that you'd come on, and you are. So you're here, so it's really good. And so we're in for a great night, that's for sure. So Brendan, I might just kick it over to you just to maybe just give an intro of yourself, who you are, what you do, why you do it, and then we'll go from there, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm married to Sandra, and Sandra and I have been Salvation Army officers 30 years in about 1 month. So so it's gone fast, and about 18 of those years, I reckon. It's about 18 have been spent based in the city of Melbourne, and we've got a very passionate heart for people that are vulnerable. So there's a lot of people that we see that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. But I think in the 18 years that I've been there, I've really learned that that idea of vulnerability applies to the most unexpected people. You know, it's not just those that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. It's the 18-year-old girl or boy that come in from a really good family, a really good school, have a night out in the city with their mates, and something goes wrong and they find themselves in a really vulnerable situation. And they're just as much the people that we want to connect with and care for as people that are doing it really tough in terms of homelessness or mental health issues as well.
Yeah, wow. We're just chatting before about where we first met, and I had to remind you that the first time we met, that it was actually sailing up the Swan River in a little tinny, I think. I was doing some out training in Perth, Western Australia, and you came to our core, and we met you, and went for a bit of a joyride up the Swan River. So that's going back a few years.
It sure is. That would have been 1990. So, I remember that trip, and I have to be honest and say I was concerned that I wouldn't return to land. That's how small that tinny was. So I was fearful at one stage, but anyway, we're here to tell the story, which is great.
Yeah, that's it. You survived. It's great.
Yeah.
So as before, Brendan, I was just telling you that we've been on this journey with our tribe, our e-tribe of Renewal, and how we sort of started with prayer, and then the renewal with our own relationship with God, being renewed with our church, our tribe, and then looking finally at being renewed with our community. And so when I was thinking about community, no greater person in my mind to talk about community. Like, you've lived it, you've been in it, you've helped so many people, and you continue to do so. And so looking forward to tonight, just hearing some of your insights on community. And so I guess the premise of tonight is pretty much around, we can be located in a community, but we can sort of miss or not see the real needs. And I think, there's a real danger for church to become insulated or isolated and actually truly miss what's going on in our community. What would you say about that?
Oh, absolutely, Andrew. And I think, I reckon it's really important that before we sort of charge out of the four walls of our building and start to run around in our community and do stuff, if we go down that path, then we can end up doing all sorts of things, and not all of them are necessarily fruitful. And I think it's really important that as followers of Jesus, we actually stop and reflect on the theology of engaging with the community. I think understanding that theology is really, really important, and understanding what Jesus did and understanding why he did it and who he did it with is really key. And I think for us, for you and I, we live out this followership of Jesus within the context of the Salvation Army. And I think in our context, and there might be other people listening that have a different context, but for us, I think it's really important that we stop and reflect on our history and the theology of our movement, the Salvation Army. And then we actually take time as followers of Jesus. For you, it's with your tribe. For others listening, it'll be with their tribe. And to actually understand what are the values of our tribe, what really pushes our buttons, what makes us passionate, and to actually take stock of what are the gifts, the strengths that lie within that tribe, what time availability lies within that tribe. And then I think it's from there we start to connect with our community. And it's not just a matter of us walking out and having a look around and say, oh, there's a need there, or there's a need there, I'll run off and do that. It's actually about connecting with community leaders. Not once. You don't just connect with the mayor once or the police inspector once or whoever it might be. It's actually about building a relationship with them. And I think that's key because we need them to understand what our hearts are. We need them to understand what skills and talents we bring to the table. And I think when you start to build that relationship, you in turn build trust with them, and they start to recognise that when an issue emerges, and in our communities today, Andrew, you will know this for sure, the number of complex issues that exist within our local communities is enormous. So the opportunity for us to engage as faith communities is huge, but we just want to make sure that we're engaging in a particular area and in a particular way where it sort of taps into the strengths and the talents that we bring to that situation, but we understand what sort of outcome we're looking for. I think that's a really key part in this as well. It could be transformation in a person's life. It could be transformation in a community. As followers of Jesus, we talk a lot about this idea of seeing God's kingdom come upon earth. And it's often helpful just to stop and reflect on, gosh, if God's kingdom was to come upon the community in which I work, what would that community look like? And it's worth just starting to ask those questions as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. You raised some really good points there about not just rushing out into our community. We see all this need, but just not rushing out with a full head of steam and some passion, and which is important. But actually, trying to understand our community and where we can probably help the most, and like you're dead right, where our skills and our passions and stuff lie, that we can actually look at that and partnering with other people. Like I said to you just before we went live, is that we're having people come to us at the moment who want to do stuff, but there's sort of no grander sort of picture or framework to hang that sort of on. And so, yeah, there kind of needs to be a plan. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think as faith communities, we need to be really clear about what's the purpose that God has called your faith community into being. What's the purpose of it? Because you will have people turn up with all sorts of fantastic ideas, maybe even attached to some fantastic resources. And it's really easy to charge off and say, oh, that's a great opportunity with lots of dollars attached. We're going to do that. But is it attached to your purpose? Is it attached to the very reason that God's brought your faith community into being? And sometimes it's uncomfortable, but we need to say no to certain offers that come our way, even if there's big dollars involved, because it may be the thing that's going to take us away from the purpose for which God has brought our faith community into being. That takes discipline to say no, and it takes discipline, I think, to understand the purpose for which we were brought into being. And I had someone just say to me yesterday, he's a very successful person in the corporate world, and he said to me, Brendan, what you need is a keeper of the mission. You need someone that will just call you to account time and time and time again, because I'm a person that has some, crazy ideas, and I love it when people turn up with their ideas, and, I tend to charge off in all sorts of directions. And my friend said to me, Brendan, you need a keeper of the mission, someone that will hold you to account, and someone that you'll listen to. And I think the other thing too, Andrew, is that I've been learning, and it came out of this book. I've got it here, the Nazareth Manifesto. It's by a guy called Sam Wells, who is the minister at St Martin in the Field in England. And it's a really interesting book, because I think when we start to talk about doing things in the community, it's really easy to come up with the assumption that we need to do things for people or do things to people. But this Nazareth Manifesto reminds us that what Jesus did was life with people. So it wasn't just about doing things to or for, but it was actually doing life with. And I think one of the really powerful things is learning, and I have to learn this over and over and over again. It's this idea that someone might be homeless, someone might be vulnerable for a whole range of reasons. They might be dealing with really complex mental health issues, but God can still work in them and through them and help me grow. It's not just about God working in me and through me and me being the great hero and, seeing lots of amazing change happen in people's lives. It's equally about me having an open heart and an open mind so God can speak through others and teach me things. And I find that I have probably my most profound days in ministry and nights when I actually take off the hat of the doer and actually put on the hat of simply being with and listening. And I think for people to have, Salvos, whatever we are, members of a community of faith, actually sit down and just do life with them, just listen, engage, that has a profound impact on that person too, because all of a sudden they start to feel human again and they start to feel important and significant. And I think that's a really powerful thing that we can bring to people.
Do you think, Brendan, for the church post-COVID, there's a missional paradigm change in terms of, instead of being the attractional model, we need to be that incarnational effort with actually being in the community and doing life in the community with people?
Yeah, I absolutely, Andrew. I think, but boy, what a huge paradigm shift that is, because it's actually saying to people that what we've measured in terms of understanding what a successful church looks like is now being turned on its ear. So for a long time in all sorts of churches, success was judged by the number of people that turned up on a Sunday to church services.
True.
And what you're talking about is actually flipping that right around and saying we're actually going to measure success in different ways. And that's going to take a huge mind shift. And perhaps for some people, it might be a bridge too far for some. But I think if we're going to be the sort of followers of Jesus and the sort of churches that we're called to be, we need to be brave and we need to be courageous, and we actually need to take that step and engage in this ministry, which is being in the community. One of the things that I find really incredible is I every now and again think to myself, I've just got a brilliant idea. I've got a new idea. And in our church, we've got a man, he's 87, George, and I'll run this idea past him and he'll say, Brendan, in 1892, the Salvation Army did this. Exactly the same thing, but they did it in a better way than what you're talking about. He does it all the time. And I remember reading a book. It's by a guy called Hugh Redwood. The name of the book's gone. God in the Slums is the name of the book, by Hugh Redwood. And it was actually about people involved in our tribe in the Salvos actually moving into slums, and they just lived in the slums and they got to know their neighbours and they loved them and they just did life with them, and they had this profound impact on so many people. And interestingly, this happened over 100 years ago. It was mainly women that were doing this. So there were very few men involved in that ministry. They called them the slum brigades, mainly women. And they had this profound effect on communities all across the UK and beyond, simply because they put aside any sense of ego and pride, and they just said, we're just going to move into the neighbourhood and we're just going to put down roots and we're going to love our neighbour. And they had this amazing impact.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is a massive, like we're going to go through this period. Churches are going to go through this period when we come out of COVID, right? Where it's a new ball game, right?
Yep.
And I think the ones that will really get it will sort of see their community as their mission field, and will really want to be trying to be incarnational with that, and not just continue what they were doing before because it wasn't working, right?
Yeah.
Like conventional church, like declining, and young people walking away disillusioned. It's just not working. And so when I look at the scriptures, I just see Jesus like just hanging out with people where, the popular places. He went to the synagogue and he went to the marketplaces and the wells and these sort of places where people were at. And he just loved being with them and just loved talking to them. Just doing life, but intertwining that with hope and faith. And I think, the Salvos were really good at that at one stage.
Yep.
We really were. And like you said, we were innovative. We were just, and I think we've lost that, and we've got to get back to it somehow.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think when I reflect on all the different sort of Christians, if you like, that I've met, they seem often to fit into two categories. I think one category is like a cultural Christian. So it's what you were just talking about then, that group of people that go to church every Sunday and they do it because that's the culture that they've grown up in. That's what their parents and their grandparents modeled to them and their friends modeled to them. And they just simply do it because that's what they were taught to do. And then you've got another group of people that are absolutely committed to the cause of Christ. And they live their life passionately with Jesus at the center of it. And they do everything they can to model Jesus in the way they live their lives because they're absolutely committed to the cause of Christ. And I think when we have these sorts of conversations and other people have these sorts of conversations, it's really easy for people's heads to immediately go to innovation. When we do engagement with the community or mission, it has to be highly innovative, and it has to be new, and it has to be really different. But it was interesting hearing you talk before, Andrew, about Jesus, because a lot of the stuff that he did was pretty ordinary.
Yeah.
It wasn't innovative. It wasn't whiz bang and new. It was pretty ordinary, but it was incredibly effective. And like Sandra and I had a lesson about this just in recent times, where we had a number of people that we met in the city, and they were really, really overwhelmed with a sense of loneliness. So, I had one woman in a wheelchair say to me, Brendan, look, if I get sick with COVID, I get sick, so be it. She said, if I die, I die. But she said, the thing that really frightens me is this idea of staying in my home and not seeing anyone. And she said, I won't cope at all with being lonely. And we had a number of similar conversations to that. And so Sandra and I just decided that each weeknight, Monday to Friday, between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m, we'd just set our phone up on the kitchen table. We'd have a cup of tea, and we just promoted the number on social media. And people would just ring from all around the country, and they just have conversations. So we were really clear. We said it's not a counselling service, it's not a crisis line. We just want to be a friend. And we had some amazing conversations with people from all different walks of life. And it was probably one of the most simple things that we've ever been involved in, but it was profound because it did two things. It reminded us that many of the people that we were speaking with were obviously lonely, but weren't just lonely during COVID. Loneliness had a grip on their lives pre-COVID. But the other thing that it reminded us was the power of just listening and the power of just having conversation. It's so important. And those simple things had such a significant impact, I think, on many of the people that rang in. And it was a powerful reminder for me, keep it simple. You don't have to come up with the latest crazy idea. Just that the really simple things can often be so profound and can really represent Jesus in really stunning ways, I think.
Yeah, look, yeah, you were chatting about that before in the pre-game chat, but yeah, I think sometimes we try and overcomplicate it, don't we? We try and make it, but it just needs to be simple. A book that really impacted me was Simple Church. I don't know if you've read that or not, but it's just sort of stripping everything back. And look, I think in our communities, I think we've lost that. For people just to be able to just talk to people, and we're all very busy and we're all running around, but people, like you said, just want to sit and talk and just have a friend. And I think that's one of the big things in our community is that loneliness, right?
Yeah, and it comes back to that Sam Wells book that I mentioned before, the Nazareth Manifesto, where it's a reminder. You know, often the difficulty to actually engaging effectively in the community is we actually need to slow down, because we just want to burn out there and do stuff and do things for people, which is lovely. But often what's needed is for us to slow down and be willing just to sit and do things with people. And I think the real challenge around doing that is that we actually have to make ourselves vulnerable, because when we do things for people, we're actually coming into that role with a position of power, because we have resources and we can actually determine what we give that person and what we don't give that person. But when we actually don't go with resources, but just ourselves, and we want to sit down and just have conversation, we have to open ourselves up, and we put ourselves in a really vulnerable situation, and it's uncomfortable sometimes. But I think there's real power in doing that.
Yeah, I guess, and I've been in churches most of my life. That word vulnerable doesn't sort of sit within that church framework, right?
Yeah.
And I think,
absolutely.
I was just going to say that if we can sort of make ourselves more vulnerable and just, do life with people, and I think we'll be effective.
Yeah, I'll never forget. We had a group of people that were training to be Salvation Army officers, and they came out with their training principle, and they came with myself and one of our workers on our soup van, our outreach van, and we come across Steve, who was sleeping rough in a park just off Albert Street in the city, and the training principal said to one of the people training to be a Salvation Army officer, will you pray for Steve? And so I said to Steve, are you okay if these guys pray with you? And he said, yeah, that's great. And then Steve stopped and said, I'll let them pray with me as long as they let me pray for them.
Wow.
And you could see these young people, training to be Salvation Army officers thought, well, this is really weird, because we're the ones that have got God at work in us and through us, not some homeless guy.
Yeah.
And Steve actually prayed this most amazing prayer. Like, it was a beautiful prayer where from his heart he was genuinely praying that God would protect, those people trying to be Salvation Army officers, and he'd protect their families, and he would do amazing things. And it was this very, very beautiful and powerful prayer. And then it came time for this guy to pray for Steve, and he couldn't pray because he was so choked up with emotion, because his whole sort of worldview had been turned on its ear, because he went there that night to do things for people. Yes. And then he found himself in a position of vulnerability where this homeless guy turned all that on its ear, and was doing something really quite beautiful and powerful for them. Yeah, it was I'll never forget that. It was incredible.
So if I'm to paraphrase what you're saying, Brendan, is that the church doesn't have all the answers?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we as Christians don't have all the answers either, which is
good.
Which is a challenge too. So, yeah.
Yeah. And like what I loved about here, I'm not sure if you said it tonight on air, but even before, there's that, how you learn from other people, like the people that you interact with or come in contact with or come across your path. You're learning about God through them. And that was amazing. Yeah. Like Steve, I guess.
Yeah. And another lady that man, she's been through a terrible life. She'd actually been raped by her father and fallen pregnant to her father and gave birth to a child that was fathered by her father. She leads a really, really challenging life, as you can imagine. And Sandra and I said to her, we'll take you out for lunch. And we went to KFC and the three of us sat down and we were starting to have something to eat. And then the old classic bag lady wandered into that KFC on Burke Street, and she had a shopping trolley and she had stuff, oozing out of the shopping trolley, and it stank. And she came over to us, and I thought, oh my goodness, all I want to do is just eat my food, And this lady that we were with actually invited this bag lady to sit down at our table, and then the lady that we were with actually took her food and took some of Sandra's food and my food and made up a little meal for this lady and invited this lady to share lunch with us. And I felt really uncomfortable. Like, I'm there thinking, oh, gee, I just want to eat this food. I don't want to be doing this. But that lady who, I'll be blunt, she'd been through sheer hell, the lady that we were with. Here was God at work in her and through her and bringing this amazing love and compassion to this bag lady. But what she was also doing was allowing God to teach me a lesson about the power and the importance of just doing life with, even though it made me feel very uncomfortable, but there was absolute power in that for that bag lady, but also for other people in that KFC that were watching what was going on.
That's so powerful. Do you think sometimes, Brendan, that we don't want to be vulnerable with people as Christians and as church leaders because we may not have all the answers or we may not know what to do? Do you think that's part of it?
Oh, yeah. And I think, in churches, I think, not all churches, but I think in some churches, if we don't measure up, we're not always allowed to belong. So I think we feel like we've got to play a particular role, got to dress a certain way, we've got to speak a certain way, we've got to behave a certain way. And then when we do those things, we get accepted into the church. It's not always the case, but it's often the case. And when we put on this mask so that we will be accepted, it's very, very difficult for healing to occur within our lives. It needs to take place. It's very, very difficult for learning to occur about ourselves. And more importantly, I think learning to occur that God just loves us and God accepts us as we are. And God takes us on this amazing journey where he does a healing work in us, and he starts to put us back together again. And those cracks in our life, he actually uses to not sort of magnify ugliness, but he uses those cracks in our life to magnify beauty. And he uses those cracks in our life as on Renewal. A French Catholic priest once said, God actually uses us to be wounded healers. So those that are hurting, and when we allow God to do his work in us, he allows us then to bring healing into the lives of others. But I think that only occurs when we're vulnerable with ourselves, we're vulnerable with each other, and we're vulnerable with God.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. Good stuff. Look, our time's nearly gone. I told you to go
sorry,
quick.
Andrew. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
I told you to go quick, didn't I?
Yeah, it flew.
Yeah. We normally finish this night with maybe one thought or one comment that you'd like to leave with the people that are watching tonight about community and about helping our community. Is there some final thought or comment that you'd like to make?
Yeah, probably two really quick. Sorry, you offered me one, but two
go,
really
go.
quick ones.
No,
I really love. I love what you said before about you've had a focus on prayer, and I personally really love a group called the 24/7 Prayer Movement. They're an international prayer movement that's set up 24/7 prayer rooms. And the thing I love about them is that it is about prayer. Prayer is at the center of what they do, but it's equally about mission. So it's actually about engaging with the community and meeting need. And it's about justice, because often when we go into the community and meet need, we start to realise that an injustice is occurring or some injustices are occurring. And when we look at the Bible, we're reminded that Jesus stood up to injustice and addressed injustice in all sorts of ways. So I think it's important to be about prayer. It's important to be about mission, community engagement, and it's equally important to be about addressing injustice in our community. And I think just the second point is I just really want to encourage people not to overcomplicate community involvement. Just keep it simple. And if we're praying and really sensing God's Spirit leading us, He'll open up amazing opportunities. But it's important that we go with that sense of vulnerability and we go with that heart to do life with, not just do things for. And I think when we go with that heart, God will use us powerfully.
Wow. Thank you so much, Brendan. You've been a blessing
Thanks for
to
having
me
us on.
and to everyone that's been watching tonight. I would like to just share a prayer, pray for you if I can. And
yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, you're doing some amazing work in the community of 614, and yeah, just keep it up, and just but also look after yourself, please.
You too, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I'll just pray for you. Father God, we just thank you for Brendan. Thank you for our time tonight. I pray you continue to bless him and Sandra, and continue to use them mightily, and to show people that you are real, but there are people that do care and that do love the vulnerable, the lonely, and people struggling with all sorts of issues. So continue to use them. I pray also for our tribe at Moreland, that you would bless and use us too, to not only be in our community, but see the hurting people, to see the needs, and to be moved into appropriate and relevant action. Keep us humble, keep us vulnerable, and we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Brendan. Always a pleasure, and bless you. And
you too.
We'll see you again next time.
Fantastic. Thank you.
God bless you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.